This is the Gaza Strip, Palestinian territories, December 27th, 2008. Ashkelon, Israel, the same day. People on both sides of the border are shaken, scared, angry, and injured. As of today, there are 426 reported Palestinian casualties and 3 reported Israeli casualties. Finding raw emotion in this devastated landscape is easy. Understanding the sequence of events that led up to this point is not. We begin on November 12th, 2004. Yasser Arafat's body is lowered into a grave in the West Bank town of Ramallah. Arafat was the longtime leader of the Palestinian Liberation Organization, as well as the leader of Fatah, the secular faction of the Palestinian Authority. With Arafat went much of what was keeping Fatah in power. The Palestinian people had grown weary of intra-Palestinian violence, the lack of a Palestinian state, and the widespread corruption that plagued Arafat's leadership. This dissatisfaction grew even after Israel completed its unilateral withdrawal from the Gaza Strip in late 2005. Collectively, these factors cleared a path to Palestinian hearts and minds for Fatah's largest political rival, Hamas.
حماس ستسعى إلى العمل على صيغة للشراكة السياسية وللتعددية السياسية، صيغة مناسبة يشترك فيها الجميع لخدمة هذا الشعب ولخدمة القضية.
Hamas is the major Islamic faction of the PLO. It gained popularity by sponsoring charitable programs and social organizations, all the while resisting Israel's presence. This resistance has taken the form of suicide bombings and other attacks on civilians, which prompted the United States to label Hamas a foreign terrorist organization. This labeling had important implications when Hamas won a majority in the PA's legislative elections in 2006. Because Hamas was considered a terrorist organization by many in the West, foreign aid to the Palestinian Authority dried up. This increased tensions between Fatah and Hamas to the point of violence, and ultimately Hamas forcibly seized control of the Gaza Strip in June of 2006. Since then, Hamas and Israel have had numerous negotiations and exchanges. A nagging point of contention between the two is the fate of captured Israeli soldier Gilad Shalit, taken by Hamas soon after seizure of the Gaza Strip.
Gilad is the most quiet person on earth. He grew up with my daughter.
Nevertheless, by June 19, 2008, Egypt had brokered a half-year truce between Hamas and Israel. 6 months later, the truce expired. Both sides believed the other violated the terms of the ceasefire, so Egypt could do little to renew the unwritten treaty. 5 days after the expiration, anywhere from 70 to 88 rockets were fired from Gaza into southern Israel. This is in contrast to the 15 to 20 a month that had been launched during the ceasefire. 3 days later, on December 27, 2008, Israel began a large-scale airstrike campaign against targets in Gaza. As of today, it is still occurring. The reported purpose of the airstrikes are to eliminate rocket fire from Gaza, weaken Hamas, and improve Israel's deterrence. Israel claims to target only sites important to Hamas, such as supply lines, weapon caches, and launch sites, but reports of hundreds of civilian casualties have clouded the picture. Questions of disproportionality and carelessness with regard to civilians have been raised from various quarters.
Israel has to comply with international law. Israel has to respect the sanctity of human lives.
Israel responds by reporting Hamas has embedded many of its military positions and weapons caches within the civilian population, including a hideout for Hamas's Gazan leadership in a sub-basement of the civilian Shifa hospital, Gaza's largest. Various international ties have driven this conflict onto the world stage. First of all, the top leadership of Hamas operate from exile in Syria. Syria, Hezbollah, and Hamas have all been reported to receive munitions from Iran. Egypt has taken on the role of mediator between Israel and Palestine, a role complicated by the fact that Gaza gets almost all of its black market supplies, both commercial and munitions related, via tunnels that run under the Egyptian-Gaza border. The United States is involved as both a chief negotiator and an important supplier of large-scale military and economic aid to Israel and Egypt, as well as humanitarian aid to the Palestinian territories. It has been reported that Israel may have used fighter jets, helicopters, and guided bombs purchased from the United States in airstrikes on Gaza, which may or may not be legal under American law.